Hello, troops for MAD mobile application development. Now, we still are talking about fragments, particularly in fragment mode. Using fragments, we can come up with various UI, and this UI can be used. Fragments can be used for UI pertaining to different screen sizes or on the orientation of the screen. For example, the difference between a portrait mode and a landscape mode. So we didn't cover this previously, and this should have been covered in part 1 of fragments, but we missed that in our classes due to time and holidays. So okay, so let me go straight. You guys refer to chapter 7 of fragments, part 1 again, right? And look at the lab tutorial challenge and landscape and portrait mode. Now you don't have to submit this, but take a look at the slides and take a look at this video so that you understand how to come up with different orientation UI using fragments, right? Okay, so let's look at this. Now you all know how to create a project. If you don't know how to create a project, then you should refer to the first assignment that we work on. But particularly what's important here in this code here, I want to show you that in our main activity we have two fragments. One we call the LM fragment, and the other is the PM fragment. Now LM fragment stands for landscape mode, and PM fragment stands for portrait mode. Okay, let's look at this. Now there is a API you can use, right? For example, if to find out if we are in a landscape orientation or a what we call a portrait orientation. So here we look at these two things here, right? First, we ask the Android in our main activity to check if our configuration orientation right now is in landscape mode, right? If we are in a landscape mode, then there's two things that we want to find out. If we are in a landscape mode, then we want to have a landscape UI. Now if we are in a different mode, for example not in landscape mode, then we want to have a portrait UI. Now because how these things work, particularly there's two cases. One, that you already have a particular fragment loaded, right? And you one is that you don't have a particular fragment loaded, and the other is that you are replacing a previous UI, right? So this depends if the current fragment exists, right? Or the current fragment exists or not. If it doesn't exist, that means that you need to add the UI. If it's already exists, then you need to replace the UI. For whatever the case, you have to commit after that, right? Fragment transaction commit. This is just the way we add and remove and replace fragments, right? So when you look at this, first we define the fragment manager, then we define the fragment transaction, then based on this we decide on what to do, right? So let's look at our code here, right? First part of all, we have to load the layout for activity main, right? So in activity main, you would define one fragment, right? uh, a frame layout basically that looks like this, right? A frame layout. Now if you have the name as log, uh, uh, so basically I name it as log, which stands for landscape or portrait mode, right? And this is the frame layout. So what we want to find out in this code right here in the main activity, that if there exists a fragment in this frame, then we have to replace them. If not, we have to add them, right? It's the same case for if it's in a portrait mode. Instead of loading the landscape fragment, we load the PM fragment. This is very easy to follow. Obviously there's two different fragments that you have to deal with, right? Step 3 here, we create two fragments. So on view create, you have to implement the R layout fragment LM you have to provide the layout that you're using, and the other one also specifies the different layout that you're using, whether you're using a portrait mode or a landscape mode. Now to differentiate these two layouts, I just provide them with a different background color right here, right, for me to find out whether it's a same icon or different icon, I mean different layout, or it sets for a particular portrait mode or landscape mode, right? So differentiate the color so you can tell the difference. Also, the string that I have, one is a landscape message string and one is a portrait message string, right? So whenever I do that, I have to define in the resources the the strings that I have, right? So here this is a landscape mode fragment and this is a portrait mode fragment. Okay, let's go back to this code. Alright, so once you define these two fragments, then you know which layout you should be using for PM portrait mode or landscape mode. Now, as we covered earlier, the main activity main.xml has one frame layout, which we will act as a placeholder for the kind of fragment that you want to load. Okay, so when you run on the emulator, basically you don't have to submit it on iTalent for this assignment, for this lab. We'll be having a assignment that combines all these fragments concept, and it will be challenging enough. But in order for you to get used to this, you might want to practice this code, right? Now when you run it on an emulator, you can change the particular orientation of your device. If you're using a Mac, you use the Fn plus control and F11 all at the same time, and this would change the landscape from landscape. This would change the orientation from landscape to portrait or portrait, vice versa. Now if you are using Windows, it's control F11, and I think Linux is the same thing, right? Okay, so this is the code that so if you notice, in portrait mode it has a different color and it says this is a portrait mode fragment, and if it's in a landscape mode it has a different color with this is a landscape mode fragment. So this is pretty obvious about how it works. So let's see how it works when we are running the application per se. So I have this code loaded with me, lm fragment.java. This is the fragment layout, and you can see here in the design this would be the portrait mode, and for landscape mode UI, this is the design for it, and we should be seeing the device as a landscape mode. So to change this UI into landscape, click here and you'll see it on landscape mode. And this should be how it should look like in your emulator, right? So okay, so when you run this application, oh yes, so when you run this application, this is one more thing I want to show you, right? Now, for reasons that are a bug in the previous API, so you need to create a new virtual device, choose a phone, choose a device, but when you click next here, choose the lollipop API level. This is because the previous system image that they provide uh, on 19 API level 19 is buggy, and there is a bug in there where you cannot change the orientation. So choose number 10, kick lollipop, or API level, that's API level 21, which uses the Google system image. If you don't have API 21, you can click here and download the API that you want, right? So lollipop is 21, and 21 and above should works as the way you want it to be. Now after creating the device with the API 21, then you can simulate this, right? So choose the device that you want with the API 21 and run it. And when you run it, you'll see this appearing in landscape mode, right? Now on portrait mode, right? So that you can define how you start it, with it, whether you want it portrait mode or whether you want it as a landscape mode. So when you run this application, you will see that your program actually loads the fragment with the portrait mode. Now, as we talked about earlier, you can change the orientation of your virtual device by pressing Ctrl F11 if you're using Windows or Linux. So if you press Ctrl F11, you'll see the orientation changes, and consequently you'll see that now the fragment is also changed, and the message is changed to this is landscape mode fragment, right? So depending on the orientation of the screen, you can have a different fragment loaded. Alright, so this is the tutorial for fragments on part 1 that we missed. So download the new slides and refer to it, and this would be important for you to know for your midterm, and also to enable for you to as a guide to finish up your assignment in this chapter. So I'll see you again on a different chapter and a different video if time permits. Thank you very much.